even if we start with the process side, we're not trying to end with the process side, right? We're doing it in service of being able to move on to bigger and better things. And sometimes that's just what we need to do first.
Welcome everybody to the Talking Roadmaps channel. In series 2, we're talking product operations, and today's special guest is very much center of that. Melissa, I couldn't be more excited to speak with you, but if I don't want to do a really bad job introducing you, so maybe you can tell our audience who you are and what it is that you do.
Sure, I'm excited to be here, Justin. So I'm Melissa. I really help organizations set up their product operating models and build great product managers and product leaders. So everything that I do, I try to do at scale. I run a company that's called Product Institute, and we usually get called into organizations that are trying to figure out what their product operating model is. So I might go in, do a little bit of an assessment, work with the executive team to explain what great product management looks like, understand what parts of the organization need help, whether it's defining roles or getting the right talent upskilled, setting their product strategies. Standing up product operations is a big part of that, and then looking at their culture. And then typically I'll advise executives around that transformation. So I help be the brainstorming partner to help implement those things, give them tactical advice on the roadmaps to actually get that change management going. And then we upskill people through Product Institute with our online training. So we have courses in product management, foundations, and product strategy, and all the stuff around that. So we kind of go into organizations, help get people up to speed on what good looks like, and then we try to assist them in helping the executives build the system around them so that they can succeed.
If you're enjoying the channel, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and give us a like. Yeah, so important. And the product operations element of that, making it lasting.
Exactly. And that's been a big thing, I think. Looking at my career and the history of doing it, I very much started out when I was consulting training teams. So I went in and I would train teams in Product Institute, introduce them to product management foundations, teach them how they should be experimenting and working with developers and designers to roll things out and measuring success. And then what I found was I'd train all these teams and they'd hit a wall. So they'd be like, I'm ready to go. This is fantastic. And then the organization wasn't really set up for them to succeed. So that's where I would start moving into things like product operations. What's the foundations we need so that everybody can go do their job well? And if I'm telling them they're measuring success, what tools are they using to actually measure it? Do we have that data? Are we actually tracking it? So there's the education pieces, there's the product operation pieces there, and then there's the educating the leadership as well so that they can understand what they need to do to enable the teams.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I can see from your career history and your experience, everything that's led you to this point, and now providing a platform where you can have the greatest influence to help people. I'm a big fan of the books that you've written and the information that you have online. They've been, certainly pivotal helping me. And so it's just how can we understand this, and then how can we share this knowledge so that most people can benefit?
And that's what I've really been focusing on. I used to go super deep into consulting and working with one company, 2 companies at a time, where I'd get in there and I'd basically be the person who would do the change management. I was pretty much the head of product operations or the interim CPO who was rolling this all out. And I did that for quite a while. But what happens is if I leave as a consultant, who's there to keep it going? And that's why I really try to take more of an enablement approach so I can help many companies at once, but also so that there is somebody there who's very knowledgeable who can take that over and keep running with it and make sure that it just doesn't fall by the wayside.
Makes absolute sense. So let's maybe put the focus onto product operations as we've mentioned that. I guess maybe we could start with, what is the purpose of product operations?
The purpose of product operations is really to be the enablement around the product management team so that they can do their jobs well. And that really comes back to, can we define great product strategies, and then can we execute on them? And then how do we monitor it to make sure that we're going back and doing the right things? And then we know how to change course. So when I look at product operations, it's 100% an enablement function. It's surrounding the product management team with the tools that they need, the processes, the capabilities, the data, and kind of the culture as well, right? To be able to have a product operating model that works really well to deliver value. So it's kind of optimizing that value chain and making sure that we can get our jobs done, focus on our customers, really focus on that value piece and get that out the door to them as fast as possible.
Nice. Yeah, that's a great answer. Makes a lot of sense. And I feel like product operations has been, if not done by name, done by its very function and purpose for way longer than we've talked about it.
Yeah, big time. And there, we were just talking about, you were doing product operations and it may not have been called that, but that's what I found. And when I look around at teams and I ask people, what's your biggest struggle, or what's not working here? I kept coming into these organizations and everybody was complaining they didn't have time to do their function. And when you look at why don't you have time to do product management, like, oh, I don't have time to talk to the users, I don't have time to do this because blah, 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 blah. Or they're reinventing the wheel of all these things in product operations off the side of their desk to get things done. So in many large organizations and even smaller organizations, there might be 7,000 different forms of roadmaps. There might be 18 different data repositories that hold the same thing, and then none of the data actually matches up. So how do you set strategy off that? So there's all of these kind of inefficiencies across the organization that kind of prevent the product managers from just focusing on what they need to do, which is understanding their customers, really understand that value, making sure it makes sense viably for the business, working with their engineers and designers and the business teams to make sure that we're crafting really good products for our customers. And instead, they're doing like all of these, they're creating templates and they're like, what's the best template to use? And it's like, that's not where your job should be focused, right? It's about what goes into the template. Like, how do you do the analysis to get stuff in there?
Absolutely. And I think what you've started to describe is why companies need product operations. There's a lot of inefficiencies. There's a lot of challenges. You've mentioned some of them. Are there kind of, how would you round out that question? Why do companies need product operations?
I look at it in like the 3 pillars of product operations and how they all come back to informing strategy, helping you set strategy, execute on it, monitor it. So on one pillar of product operations, we talk about data and insights. So that's really the quantitative data that lives within your systems. And in so many organizations, it's all siloed up into many different things, right? We've got tons of great win-loss analysis and data in a sales system. We've got our product analytics, locked up in an analytics tool. We've got our, data uptime and stuff like that locked up in developer tools. So everything is siloed across the organization. And when a product manager needs to go and start to measure success and evaluate it, like, where do you know to go to pull that information out? So I think our biggest hurdle in the past used to be, I need the data. Like, I'm not even instrumented for data. And some companies are still there, but now a lot of it's instrumented and it's just all over the place, right? Like, there's so much data. It's so siloed all over the place that you're trying to figure out, how do I put this into a picture that makes sense for us? Right? So with that pillar of product operations, what we're really looking at is how do we aggregate data across the systems in a way that makes sense for product managers to actually measure it. So it's not just about product analytics. Like, I also need to know my customer segmentation. I need to know win-loss data from sales. I need to know how that connects back to the financials, right? I need to be able to tie all of this stuff together. And if it's all separated or not even being measured at all, I need to put that in first. So product operations really looks at, how do we get data into the hands of product managers that's valuable for them? And there's a piece of that as well about self-serving. So what tools are we using so that they can go in and start to query the data, understand it a little bit better, and then make their own reports or make their own analysis for it. So in some teams, we have the data and insights. You might be working with the data team. It's not just about setting it up yourself, but it's like that liaison that goes to the data team and advocates for the product managers. So it's like, hey guys, you're building data for the sake of engineering, really. Let's bring this over here. Or it's going up to the sales op teams saying hey, a lot of this stuff is relevant for us too. Can we API into it, pull it into this aggregation so that we can start looking at it and we know ahead of time what you guys are going to ask for from sales. And you're building those bridges across the organization to kind of centralize that so that you can look at your analysis and keep track of it and do your dashboards and all of that stuff, so we keep the pulse. So that's one piece of helping to inform strategy, monitor it as well. And there's the qualitative aspect, which is the customer and market research. And this aspect is not about taking away the responsibility of doing that, but how do you enable product managers with the right tools and frameworks to go do that? So in many organizations, it kind of looks like this, in the customer side too, I would say there are research ops. So if you have a research ops team, this is what they do. I would just work with them to make sure this is working out. But if you don't have a research ops team, you're going to want to go in there and say, how do we make it easy to get in touch with our customers? How do we make it easy to test with our customers? Do we have like, ways that we can go out and do beta testing with them, groups of this, advisory boards? How do we make sure people are not contacting the same customer over and over and over again because they know that they'll say yes, which was a big issue that we had in many places that I worked at. And then in really large organizations too, like banks, for example, this could also be the function that helps define the requirements and the compliance around going to talk to customers. So they're making sure that people who are talking to customers are doing it in the right way, doing it in a compliant way. They have many modes of doing research that they can offer to people based on the risk. So it's that type of system that sets it up so that the product managers can go talk to customers and they're unlocked there. So all that recruiting piece, all of those things get more standardized, more efficient. And I usually suggest this is also about, right, do you automate some of that stuff, right? How do you do the work to set it up so it's not a burden to go do customer research? And then on the flip side, once you do that customer research, how do you aggregate that information and then bring it back to the teams so it just doesn't get lost? So many teams go out, do customer research, and then it lives in a Google Doc or a Word doc or something, and nobody sees it again. So I'm really excited about AI here because there's so many tools popping up where they're taking a lot of that qualitative information, putting it into big databases, and now you can start to query for insights, see who's been, who's done an interview on something similar, watch the interviews, be pointed in the right direction. And that's a huge part of this. And that makes me so excited because I wasn't around like 6 years ago when I was dumping things out of like 18 Google Drives and stuff and going through it.
Had to become an inadvertent MongoDB expert, right? Just earlier on in your career to try and find this.
So when I started out, I had to just, all of the data, we used MongoDB very early at OpenSky. We actually were across the street from the MongoDB office, which was kind of funny. And some of our people had left and gone to MongoDB. So there was we had a really close relationship. But I had to go take a class on it just to get any of the information out of the systems because otherwise I'm bothering the engineers all the time and I wanted to track it. I wanted to measure stuff and it took a very long time to take that class. And I'm going, I've got so much other work to do. I do think it's important to get the data and I had to get the data, but I also was was it the best use of my time to spend the last 50 hours learning MongoDB? Probably not, right? So that's very much what we're trying to do in product operations is take that work away and automate it as much as possible and just give people the tools to go do it. And then that's the last part of the pillar as well, which is the access and governance. And that's probably the most controversial for people. But this is where tooling lives, what product operating model from a process perspective lives. What do we do here? If we're in this company, it's about how you adapt it so that nobody has to go learn how to make a roadmap 5 times if they change teams, right? And that's how I would look at it. It's not about burdensome process. It's about there are certain ways of working and certain ways that we name strategy, for example, certain canvases we use, certain templates we use. What are we going to standardize to make ourselves all work better together so that we can all understand what we're working on as well? What are the tools we're going to use to do that and surface up that information? And how do we codify that? So that helps build out this product operating model and helps say this is the way that we're going to do it here. And this is what it means for our company. So that's the last piece of product operations is really codifying the things that matter there and then helping to get those tools and those resources and those templates and stuff out to the team so that they know to use it and everybody's kind of working consistently in the ways that will make a difference.
I love that you said that. Codify really resonates with me. I work with clients to kind of create their standard operating procedures around these things. But that's lit a bulb in my mind around often a misconception about product operations is that it's a process type thing. I think, many people in our sphere have criticized it sometimes as well. And that's not the case, right? What you've said is there's 3 different pillars to this. And what would your response be to people that might say that product operations is just unneeded process?
I think it comes from people working so that mostly comes from people watching how large organizations work. And I work with the largest banks in the world. And what happens to that is that in some of those companies, when you come in and you're saying what do you need to just get this much better today? Some of it might be process related. So that might be where they're starting, but not where they're ending, right? And I think it starts to get a bad rap because we see a lot of people focusing on process first. And I do think it's going to be worrisome if we just stay there. So my job is to push them to say, this is not the end all be all, right? You're not just process people, you are product managers for product managers, right? And you might need to automate or templatize some stuff because it's going to help you with the biggest burning issue right now. But then next, I need you to go like look at the data stuff. I need you to go look at this other stuff. So I think there's like a lot of pushback because people are worried about the stigma, especially with like agile coaches and stuff like that. But if you look at any other role, like sales ops standardizes sales operating procedures. Like if you think a multi-billion-dollar organization that is doing like enterprise sales doesn't have a process for it, like you're kidding yourself. Like they are probably super rigid in their process, and they have a way to qualify leads, to like define these things. They have metrics around it. Like that's kind of what we're talking about. So the idea with it is that even if we start with the process side, we're not trying to end with the process side, right? We're doing it in service of being able to move on to bigger and better things. And sometimes that's just what we need to do first.
Yeah, that's such a great response. I love that. One of the questions I ask our guests is often how they see product operations set up across different organizations. We know that sometimes it can be part of somebody's job, or it can be an entire function. We also know that sometimes it can fit within product management, but actually it can report into different reporting lines. The slight difference on that question I'm going to ask you is, how have you seen product operations set up the best? When has it been set up to be the most successful?
Yeah, in the places, and it depends the size of the company. So like, let's take smaller scale up companies at first, right? You might have a chief product officer or a VP of product with a head of product operations reporting into you. That might not be a VP. It might be a director. It might be just one product operations person to start. But let's say like we scaled it a little bit. We've got a small SWAT team of people who are basically like viewed as the platform or internal tools team for the product managers. And what they're doing is they're going out, analyzing what the product managers need. They're the customers, right? To work better. And then they are creating either, you know, a process or an automation or a tooling or a platform approach right around it. So they are really looking at like all these aspects we've talked about, and then they're kind of building products for the product managers. So that's how they're looking at it. And I think reporting into the product role is very important for it, but we usually have a dotted line where these people will go work with other ops roles. So they're probably working with DevOps or working with sales ops. You know, they are not just siloed where they're doing this all by themselves, but they should be in data. They're working with data. They should be working across the organization and kind of building those bridges to make sure that we're not just reinventing the wheel. And I'm like, if it's already been done before, like, don't do it, right? Just find out where it is. And maybe we have to tweak it just so product managers could do it, right? Or use it or make it a little bit more useful for them. That's fine. So they need to take that approach of like, how do we scale it? At larger organizations, usually have a bigger team of product management, but it should be, not product management, product ops, but the product ops should cut across all of product management. So this is where I also think it is a function, even in like a super large enterprise, underneath the chief product officer. And then this team might be much bigger. You probably have a VP there, but these people are looking at how we standardize it across the entire enterprise organization. So that if you have different product lines, you're not just reinventing the wheel in each. And if you ever have to go cross team or platform or anything like that, you don't have a whole new way of working with all of these different teams too. So I've seen teams set them up that way. They usually have a little more definition in the type of work that people will do. Like in a scale up organization, you might have, a couple product ops people. Usually they're a little more oriented towards let's say data and the market research and the customer research parts of it, like gathering the information, making sense out of it, doing the tools. They're doing a little bit of standardization too with the frameworks. But in the larger organizations, usually because just by nature of what they're doing, like if they're on a transformation journey, they're going to be starting with like some of the basics. Like we need to do operating models between us and, other teams. We need like a product operating model. We need a roadmap tool, like some basic stuff to like set it up and get it going. And hopefully that's not where they end up at the end of the day, but it is the first way to do it. And they're servicing usually, I've seen teams of like 1,000 product managers. So like, it's not a small group of people these people are actually servicing. It's like, it's a huge group. And there's a huge change management aspect usually involved in organizations that do transformations that the product ops people are taking on. So they are responsible for a lot of this change management, introducing stuff to the organization. Whereas in a scale up, it will be a little bit of that, but it's easier to adopt at smaller people, let's say.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's how I've found product operations myself as a consultant, is that even though I've got the bias on the tooling side of things, I'm often brought in as the tooling aspect of a transformation. And so then you're starting to go, okay, well, let's understand the tooling needs to underpin the process. What is the process? And so it's another way into that transformation journey, or that product operations journey. And actually that maybe opens up a question of how do you justify having product ops? You know, from being involved in it myself, and obviously you've built a huge part of your career around this. Many of our listeners will be thinking, well, Melissa, that sounds great, but how do I get started? What would you say to them? How do you justify having product operations?
The one part I have not mentioned of this that's probably the absolute key to get into here is that product operations isn't just servicing product managers, but also executives. So the biggest question I get from executives, especially in really large organizations, is that how do I actually connect all the stuff my teams are doing back to what it's going to do for the business, right? That investment. I'm investing. I'm spending millions and millions and millions of dollars over here on tech. What do I get from it? And answering that question is extremely hard, but that's where like product ops can help. So what we typically do is if you're trying to justify it or do it, we would say demonstrate it. So start by helping the executives get the transparency that they need into what people are doing, right? And not just like a monitor thing, but like what are they achieving so that they can go do their jobs more effectively, set the strategy that we actually need. And then once they see that value, they go, oh, okay, I understand like what this is supposed to do. Like, yeah, we want more of this. That's usually like the best inroads way to do it. There are like baby steps that you can take to do it. Whenever I come into an organization, they say, hey, I do not know how to connect this business value like back to my investment. I'll say, okay, you know, where's the team's roadmaps? And this might sound like super basic, but like they don't exist, or they exist in different tools, or they exist in a tool and everybody has dumped stuff in it that's in crazy different levels, right? It's like a story and then like something ridiculously high and like fix my API bug, right? And nothing is codified in a way where you can go, all of this stuff is like about customer retention. And by doing X, Y, and Z, we believe that we can increase customer retention in this segment by 20% by the end of the year, right? So there's no connection on it, but we also can't even draw a line around this group of stuff is supposed to do this. So that's also where, of course, OKRs and stuff like that come in. But if you can't even scope it correctly at that level, you can't bubble it up to the next level. So there's a bunch of work in there to just like reconcile that, bring transparency. But when you bump it up to that level from the teams, and then you can roll it into initiatives for the executives, it's that portfolio level piece where you say, hey, these initiatives are tied back to these company goals. And here's what we're thinking time-wise, here's the progress towards them, here's what's at risk. That insight that they get there, they go, oh, wow, that's amazing. Okay, so I'm spending like 20% of my investment over here on this initiative. And that's actually not something that we have prioritized at all. Like, why are we doing that? And it's just like a disconnection from strategy. And that happens everywhere. Like, it's not a abnormal thing, right? Like that everywhere has problems like that. And it's just about getting the stuff surfaced up to see it. So that's a big part, I think, of the inroads to product ops. And every time I've come in and shown that in organizations, they're like, oh, okay, I get it. And I'm like, yeah, so now to do this well, right, we have to do X, Y, and Z, and your product ops teams will be doing this. And now they're going to make sure that to set the goals that you want to see to roll this up, the teams have the right data. Okay, so now we got to go do some data stuff. Oh, you're not sure that we should be doing this. How do they validate it? Let's look at our experimentation toolkits. How are they actually going about this? So starting from the executive level and trying to provide them into transparency of what's going on kind of unlocks you to go do the other stuff that you need to work with the team.
I was going to say, it's no wonder we've seen this, meteoric rise of product operations when you're demonstrating value to the executives. I mean, it's no surprise, right? The people, you're demonstrating what matters most to the people that need to see it most. And so it's great to see that. It's almost an unfair advantage, I think, having product operations do that, because they have this product management mindset. They know what value to stakeholders or customers or users looks like. And so we've got that in our back pocket. I wonder if, and again, this isn't a question I planned to ask you, but people coming to product operations, you might think, oh, it's product managers turning to product operations. But I wonder if some of the best product operations people have come from roles completely outside of product management. What have you seen?
Big time. Like I've seen a lot of people transition from product management, come into product ops for a while. I think it's a good path too, if you're like on a leadership track and you're trying to get broad experience on how to run like a team, let's say, or build an organization. So I've seen people who've gone up to like director of product roles, maybe a VP, and then they kind of pivot into doing product operations. And it works very well for them if they have this operational mindset, because now they have to make sure that thing works across scale, right? So that kind of rounds out your experience if you've been very heavy on the strategy side, which is fine. But that's about like, how do I scale my team? How do I keep going? But I have met tons of product ops people who are more just from operational backgrounds, and they look at it as they've got this product manager problem solving mindset, but they might not solve everything through software, which is okay. It might be solved through process. It might be solved through different automations and things like that. And they're not so precious about it all being in like custom software or anything like that. They're out there exploring tools or exploring different things. So it's worked really well for people with that. I think like operational backgrounds, people who love automating things, people who love problem solving in that way, and who can think about systems, really thrive in a product operations role. So I don't think it needs to necessarily be a product management person, but I do think it helps. If you're hiring, like, let's say a VP director, like they should have pretty good experience with product management. They don't have to be a product manager, but they should have been working on with those teams. They know how it works. Like there's a lot of scope there. But if you're hiring more junior people onto it and they can learn, I'd look for people with those problem solving mindsets, help introduce them to it. I might not put them around the process related stuff first, right? But I would put them around things like data and things like, operationalizing like our tools and like how do we think about the cadences for our product strategy meeting? And they're usually working with the person who's the subject matter expert, which is the chief product officer or the VP of product, to take those things and then operationalize them, which is actually interesting if I think about it. I've never explained it that way before, but we always talk about subject matter expertise versus product management expertise in like product management. And I'm always the one who says, hey, if you have a bunch of subject matter experts and this person's willing to learn, like hire that person. If they've got the attributes and the skills necessary, they can go learn from a subject matter expert. It's similar in product ops where you have the operationalizing experience, you've got that change management experience, you've got that like analytical thinking and the systems thinking around it. Your subject matter experts are the product managers on how they want to do the process. So if you have somebody there who is great at that, then you can tap into them.
Yeah, nice. They've almost got this kind of the different pillars that you describe of product operations. You've just got different people specializing in that area. And I think that's actually, I'm working with a large airline at the moment and forming part of that team. And I think that's what we've found there as well. There's some people who are specializing into road mapping and dashboards. Other people are specializing into the process side of things. Other people into the tooling administration. And so it's great that you've explained it that way. And it kind of reinforces our approach as well into that.
Yeah. And a lot of people are like, well, then there's not just one role for it. But if you think about product management, if I'm going to go hire a product manager for like a B2B SaaS company to work on the platform side, that's going to be very different than hiring a product manager that I want to work on growth marketing for a consumer, direct to consumer brand, right? Like it's the same kind of rhythms, but it's not the same tool sets, right? It's not the same thinking in certain ways, but they're both product managers at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it makes sense. What would you consider to be a best practice? Well, I don't really like the term best practice. Let's change that slightly. What do you consider to be a good practice in product operations?
So signs that it's working really well is the product management teams are very excited to have them, right? Like leaders want to engage with them, product management, like they're being asked to do so much because people see the value. Like, you're on the right path. And that does happen. If people are like, product ops, I don't know what they do. I don't really care. It usually means that they're not looking at what are the problems that people actually care about that we solve too. So I think very much like product management, like you have to prioritize what you're doing. It's not just like go in and roll everything out and don't think about prioritization on it. You have to be like, what is going to get me the buy-in and the support for me to keep growing this? So like I said, you usually start at the leadership level, but then you got to go to the product managers. Like what's burdensome to you? Where are your issues? And if you knock it out that way, and you start building systems from that perspective, you're solving your problem for your customer, but they're also going to get very excited. So they go, oh, what else can you do? What else can you do? And then it becomes a little more, I think the part here too is that like it's strategic, it's not reactive. And the people who don't do product ops well end up in this reactive mode where like somebody will come over and just be like, I need this template or I need this thing, but there's no reasoning why. And they're not setting up the framework and the structure for what they do to show how it actually is, like I said, product management for product managers. Like there is a whole roadmap here. There's systems that we build. There's things that we manage. There's a whole thing that we scale here to make it the most effective. And if you get into this mode where it's just like, hey, can you do these little things for me? And you end up more like a project manager, what happens is the teams get way too big. There's value being happening in like one or two little tiny pockets over here, but it's not scaling to the rest of the org. And then everybody starts fighting over like product ops resources and like, I need to have mine and you need to have yours. And then you just end up as project manager. So that's not like what we're trying to do.
Yeah, or a product operations feature team, right? Where they're just trying to do, right, just bringing it back to escaping the build trap, is just exactly that. We're not there to have a washing list or a wish list of broken product management things, right? And I think that's really important. I love that you brought that into that question. So we talked about, the good stuff, the good behaviors and the bad behaviors there. I wonder what you see in terms of product operations involvement in road mapping. And that's a selfish question for me because I love the road mapping space. How have you seen that work?
Yeah, I think product ops, there's a couple different pieces of road mapping, and it all kind of comes back into developing and monitoring strategy. So if you think of product ops getting into the road mapping space, like most people will just immediately go towards, hey, they manage the tool, they select the tool, they set it up, they train the people on how to use it. But it's so much more than that. There's also what goes into the road mapping tool. So like I said, if we can't decipher what's in that road mapping tool, it doesn't matter, right? Like, why do you even have one in the first place? So I used to do this, like when I was at Athena Health, this was one of the things that we ended up rolling out. So I had like trained all the teams, and this was the first place I started to get into product operations. And we're trying to make it transparent for the leaders. So we looked at our roadmaps and everything was at 18,000 different levels. So I went back and I said, okay, we did learn in here about scoping. So here's what we call this, like an epic or whatever you want to call it. Everybody changes it. I call it an option for the teams. Like, let's go back to our training and pull that out. This is what this should be in our road mapping tool, right? Like, this is the level it goes in. Here's how you write it. Here's how you know it's good. Let's make sure the right attributes are on it. And then we train all the teams to go back and refine them all, move things around into whatever level they're going to be and rescope it. And then we said, okay, now we can pull this back up into the next level of strategy, which was initiatives. So then at the same time, though, I was working with the leadership team all the way from the CEO down to everybody else saying, okay, what's the format and what's the way that we're going to write our strategy? So we've got, visions over here and some objectives over here, but it's not really bringing it back into how do we all get aligned? So we worked on like structure, refinement, how we communicate it. And then that was a product options piece as well. I'm not building the strategy for them. I'm not like telling them what their vision should be, but I'm saying like, okay, you just told me what your vision is. Let's make sure it's written in a way that makes sense. Here's questions that I would ask if I was a product manager. Let's refine that. Like here's our standardization. We're all going to write memos like this. And the memos are going to be 2 to 3 pages long. They're going to contain this. They're going to contain that. These initiatives that are on the memo, that's what all these epics get rolled up into. Now we can start to track them in our roadmap tool and see if we make progress towards them. The goals are communicated there. We can instrument it out. So like, here's where like the templates came in. Here's where the tool came in. And then we had, we built a cadence for actually reviewing it. So we were like, when do we review roadmaps? When do we review how they make progress towards initiatives? How do we review the company-based metrics? So we redesigned all the QBRs. We redesigned all the product, meetings where we would do that. We changed the number of people in meetings. We made it for the right level of audience. We talked about what we would discuss, what we wouldn't discuss. And then we defined all of that to make sure that we were going on the right path. And like, what happens if we're not? How do we change it? Who's responsible? What do we do? So we basically built that rhythm and that operating model around the roadmap. And it's not, again, it's like not just the roadmap. They had a tool for roadmaps. It was Jira. I didn't love it, but it existed. Right. But they did not have all the stuff around it that actually makes a roadmap valuable.
The hygiene of it and the segmentation of the data and the understanding of it. And in fact, I'm really grateful that you mentioned that and grateful that you went into detail in your book, Product Operations. We'll put links below so that people can find this. And I'm be surprised if somebody hasn't read it. But you talk about Athena Health there and you break down that case study that you've just described. And I mention that because that was one of the most useful ones that I found, being more in the product road mapping and execution tool type space, was just finding that and seeing the clear segmentation was one of the most helpful in my journey. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I think it's important to see that it's not just it's not just about tools. That's like where everybody gets naysay about product operations, right? They're like, it's process, it's tools, but they're for a purpose, right? Like you can't operate a business without those things. So how do you just make sure they're super valuable? And that's what makes me excited, because that scales, right? Like that helps people, it scales, it makes it possible to do the hard work of really like making sure we're building the right thing for our customers. And not that this is easy work, but it helps us like all focus around that, because if we take that noise out at the end of the day, then we concentrate on value.
So I've got a couple of quick questions for you now, because I want to be mindful of your time. I wonder whose advice on product operations you listen to. Who really resonates with you in the area at the moment? I think there's a growing community of people.
Yeah, I've always learned a ton from Blake Samick, who's been doing this for a very long time. So like Blake did it at Uber, he did it at Stripe, he's at OpenAI now, and he's very open about like what he learned and how he would do it differently in different organizations and how the context actually shifts it. And I think that's really important. So I love his perspective, because it's very much about how do you go into the organization and like figure out what they need. And what Uber needed was very different than what Stripe needed. And I'm sure like OpenAI needs something completely different, but there's all these principles that are underlying it and the systems that he's already built, but then he designs it to meet the company where it's at and then grow it from where it is. So I've always really enjoyed listening to him and kind of understanding like his journey on it, what he's learned over time, what worked, what didn't work. And I think that's super valuable.
And I'd love you to share some of your resources here as well. But what product ops resources do you use or recommend to people? And absolutely some of your own are completely applicable here.
When I look at portfolio road mapping, I recommend Dragonboat there. That is very much for leaders though. It's for like leadership. It's how do you get the financial outcomes measured back to what we're doing on the portfolio level. So I think that's super important, especially at like scale, when you're doing that in a really large organization. When I look at aggregating data and trying to get it, I recommend usually looking at like something like a Dovetail. I think Pendo's doing a really good job now of aggregating a bunch of information and pulling those streams together, not just in analytics, but they're also now getting the qualitative side into and then branching it to analytics. So those two, I think, are doing really great jobs on bringing in more information so that you can synthesize it better and then make decisions off of that. So I would set something up like that anytime I would go into an organization and look at that. What else product ops tools that we're doing? There's so many emerging right now too that I'm like, I feel like every day something else comes out. I've seen a bunch that I haven't tried, so I don't want to like rattle off names that are not proven yet. But those I could tell you have worked really well for me. What else? Having some kind of analytics tool in there from a centralized data aggregation is really important. So whether that's a Tableau or a Looker or anything like that, but pulling most of those streams in is going to be really important. I think whenever you're looking at the tools, I'd also look for integration. Like if a product ops tool doesn't have an API infrastructure or doesn't integrate with the different tools in your organization, I would not touch it, because you will need to do that at one point. So I'd look at like, what are the major systems that different departments are using? And does this system that we're evaluating actually integrate into some of those? I think there is a really cool pattern emerging with a lot of these companies in the product space where they are getting more integrative into other stuff. Like I've seen like they're plugging into sales tools like HubSpot, Gong, like what you call customer support tools, Zendesk. So they're pulling the information in about customers and starting to aggregate it, which is fantastic. So if you don't have something that does that, you're going to like miss out on the next wave.
Totally. It's such an exciting time. It really is. Melissa, it's been incredibly enlightening speaking to you. As I mentioned off camera, it's great to actually speak to you rather than to watch your videos. How can people get in contact? If they've been inspired by things that you've said, how's the best way to get in contact with you or get more to access to your resources?
Sure. It's been great. Thank you so much for having me. You can contact me. My online school and a lot of resources are on productinstitute.com. So there's a way to contact me there. Also, I blog on melissaperri.com. Occasionally, I haven't been as great there, but LinkedIn is a great place to kind of see what's more up to date. And then I run a podcast called the Product Thinking Podcast, and I answer questions on there from anybody in the audience and do that once a week as well.
All that leaves me to say is, Melissa, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.